Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. Today we're going to look at the Esterbrook J fountain pen that I picked up last Sunday and showed you in the resurrection from last week. By the way, that Parker Golden Pearl sold within minutes of that video going live. I picked this up at a local antique store. These are lovely little pens and they're really cool to collect. This is in a brown root beer, reddish brown kind of a color. Beautiful modeled celluloid. This is a 4th generation Esterbrook Model J. It has Esterbrook on the clip and the rounded dome plastic top and bottom jewels. And it has Esterbrook engraved in the barrel. This one's made in Canada. There are no cracks or chips on this lever-filled fountain pen, but it has a lot of scratching. I would guess this pen is from around early 1950s, something like that. There's no date codes on these to figure out when they were made, but this is the last sort of iteration of this pen. The nib on this one is a 2668 Esterbrook, made in the USA, steel fountain pen nib, and an ebonite feed, and that 2668 designation says it's a nib for everyday writing use. But this one, I'm not sure whether they're all like this, but let's take a look at this tip. Look how flatted that is. And when I did a dip test on that nib, it just wrote like glass. So I'm really impressed with this nib so far. It's slightly misaligned, so it's scratching a little bit, and it feels like an italic almost with those sharp edges. So I might have to do some tuning on that, but we have to get that nib and feed out of that section. The section's in really good shape, no gouges or anything, and I twisted on this and it didn't budge. So I had a little bit of heat. Now it's seized again. Oh, there it goes. It comes right out, and there's remnants of the Old Sac right there, and the Old Sac is inside. So I'm not sure how the J bar in here is faring, so we need to get that desiccated sac out of there. So I'm going to try to go at it with some tweezers here and see whether I can tease bits of it out. Yeah, it's very crunchy tissue here, and see whether we can break it up. Sometimes by pressing the lever, you can listen to this. I don't want to break it, but sometimes pressing the lever will crunch it up a little bit and help get it out. Oh, some pieces coming out. There we go. Gotta get all of that old sac out of there to check on the lever's status. So the lever seems to be intact. It's just a lot of old sac. You call that old sac, old dried up sac, or whatever you call your mother-in-law. There's a big chunk of that old thing came out, and it looks like it's working pretty well. I've never seen this metal bar, this curved metal bar in here before. That must be an addition that they made to the Esterbrook's in later models. I've not seen that in one before. There's still some more. There we go. There's most of the rest of it. So let's go in with our inspection camera and see what the rest of the barrel and the J-bar looks like inside there. So we go in there and pull on the lever a couple of times and see that it seems to be working correctly. Good. So now what I'll do is I'll soak this barrel and cap in the pen flush ultrasonic bath to get all that old ink out of there, and we'll soak the section as well. I'm going to peel that remaining latex sac off of the edge of that section, and then we'll see whether we can knock that feed out and take a look at the nib. And I'm just cutting the remaining latex sac off of that section. It's glued on with shellac, you can see right there. So score it with an X-Acto blade and peel it off just like a banana. Then I just scrape a little bit of the edge there to get all that crystallized shellac, most of it off. We'll soak this and then I'll sand that down so it's nice and clean and dry and free of debris for the new sack. Now I've let the section soak a little bit in pen flush, 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia. And we get our knockout rod and knockout block. We'll try to tap that feed nib out of the section. Go. There's the nib and the feed. Try to pry them apart. A lot of old ink in there, so that'll all go back in the bath again and sit for several minutes. Okay, now I'm gonna just put some metal polish on that nib with a cotton swab and see whether we can get some of that old ink off it. It came up better than I thought it would. I'll have to buff it a little bit and see whether I can put a shine on it. Most of that old ink is out of there. There we go. So I'll buff that a little bit and see if we can get a shine on it. It looks pretty good. And there we go off the buffer wheel. Looking pretty good. There's a little bit of corrosion down there, but that isn't visible. And it looks like there's a little bit of a waver in that nib tine. Looks like someone might have worked on this nib. That certainly doesn't look like a stock grind to me on that tip, but we'll see how it writes. So I've polished up that nib and cleaned the feed and inserted the nib and feed back into the section again. I've cleaned off and sanded that nipple of the section, get ready for a sack installation, and I've cleaned out all of the remnants of the old sack inside the barrel, and you can see how that mechanism is working nicely. Let's take another look inside with our orthoscopic camera, and you can see how the mechanism works, and that little extra piece that I thought was metal is actually more of this celluloid. Same color, it's just an extra thickness of celluloid right there. And I find that very interesting. It's like a reinforcement right there. So all we have to do now is do a dip test on this nib to make sure it's working correctly, and then we'll resack it and then polish up the rest of the pen. So I'm just going to put the section back into the barrel for now. We'll get out some Watermans and just dip the nib just a little bit and see what we've got. So 1950s, I'd say. Esterbrook J. And that's smooth with a couple of edges. There's an edge there, an edge there, which is kind of what I thought when I looked at the nib close up, that it looks like it's been chiseled into, let's get some focus here, looks like it's been chiseled into an italic. You see how square those edges are. So I'm going to try to round those down a little bit. It's actually, when you get that flat part flat on the page in the right orientation, that's as smooth as glass, just like that. But as soon as you rotate the nib this way or that way, it gets scratchy, which is the hallmark of a cursive italic nib. And we know from the Esterbrook chart that the 2668 nib is not a cursive italic nib. So this has been custom ground, and it looks like there's a bit of a wave. So this nib's been repaired and then cut. So it might have been a regular 2668 that's been cut a little bit. So I'm just going to take those scratchy edges there and there off of that nib to make it more like a smooth, regular writing nib. Cursive italics are really interesting nibs, but you have to be very, very precise with them. Very precise. So I'm going to do that with a little bit of micro mesh, and I'm just going to start with 8,000 grit. I'm going to drop a little bead of water on my 8,000 grit, and I'm just going to do my baby's bottom kind of thing, but I'm going to start angling the nib to the side to knock off those edges on that side, and then up and down. So it's very smooth that way. I'm going to start turning the nib that way, that way, that way. And I'm going to dip the nib again, see how it feels. Yeah, it's still very rough. I think that steel tip is very tough. I'm going to go up one more to 6,000 grit here. Drop a bead of water, and I'm just going to angle it to the side and go back and forth like that and like that on the other side, and then turn it up. So we're going to knock off those square sides, that square side, that one, and the very top one. The bottom one seems to be okay. Well, the bottom one needs it too. Now be aware that the tines are absolutely aligned perfectly, so you don't want to do this if your tines aren't aligned. And that's a little bit better. I'm going to do that a little bit more with this 6,000. So what I'm trying to do here is, here's the square nature of this cursive tip. There's a square corner there. This is the writing surface here. So there's a square corner right there I'm trying to round out. And then when you look at it from the bottom, so there's the tine there, the bottom edge, that one there, is very rough as well. So on the angle, kind of looks like that. And that angle right there, I'm trying to round up. And the tip as well. So that was with 6,000. That's much better. Yeah, it's not scratching at all. A lot of feedback now because we're at 6,000. So we'll go up to 8,000 now again. So this is with the 8,000. Yeah, that's very nice. It's a lot of feedback now because we're at 8,000. So we'll go up to 12,000 and do the same thing with our up and down. We're going to polish the whole nib at this point. I'm rolling it back and forth a little bit to get those edges. Going up straight, round off the top corners, and then just do some regular figure eights. There we go. Now we're at 12,000. Very smooth and regular. I turn it that way and it's not scratchy. Turn it this way and it's not scratchy. Up and down. Nope. Low angle. Nope. It's fine. It's actually more like a medium. This is about a 0.6 to 0.7 millimeter. Well, this is a lovely writer. And it's a very, very wet nib. And I've just got a hint of feedback now. It was pretty heavy before. So we'll take this nib out of the section again, and we'll put a sack on that. Put a sack on it. But before we do that, I'm going to polish up this celluloid. We'll mask off the clip. The clips on these Esterbrook J model pens were riveted in, so you cannot, if they get loose, there's not much you can do other than maybe glue it. But this one's in really good shape, not budging at all. And so I'm going to mask off the ring, the cap ring, and that hardware. And we'll go at this with some 400 grit and some micro mesh, and then some polishing compound, and see how well that celluloid comes up. And then we'll add a sack to it, and we'll check to see how it fills. Okay, let's go ahead and resack this pen. I've polished up the section with some polishing compound. It looks very nice. And I've got a number 16 size sack ready to go. We just have to trim it to size. So we put the section up against the barrel, and we see that the sack will come up to about the bottom of those threads. So let's put the sack in the pen, pinch it right at the top, and then move that point to the top, and then pinch it where the threads are, and that will be where we make our cut. So we trimmed it to length. Let's do a test fit here first. Put our sack spreader on. Snug that up to the section, and then put it in the pen. That seems to be right. It all fits nicely. I'm going to add a little bit of pure talc to this latex sack to allow it to slide inside the barrel so it doesn't get twisted. There we go. Now we take our shellac pen from the inky nib, twist it like a piston, dials up a little bit more shellac to the end of that brush, and just paint that nipple all the way around. You think that brush might tickle on your nipple, but it's okay. It's ebonite, it doesn't feel it. Then we get our sack spreader again, tuck it up under the lip, and then just give it a little bit of a twist. Make sure that it seals properly. We'll take our pen again and just paint that seam all the way around to make sure there's a good ink seal against leaks. And we'll let that dry for several hours. In the meantime, I can go at this cap and barrel and polish it up. We'll start with some 400 grit flexible sandpaper to get most of those gouges out, and I'm going to avoid that imprint so that we don't allow it to fade. Once we get up through the micromesh into the finer grades, I'll go over it. It won't be as invasive at that point. So there you can see some scratch marks. Let's see how the 400 grit takes it out. There we go, the scratches are gone. We'll do that all over, and I'll avoid scratching that lever as well. There, now we have a fairly flat, smooth surface with all the scratches sanded out. And we'll go through our micro mesh from 1500 grit to 12,000 grit, and then finish off with some polishing compound. And there we go, all polished up. Even the end finial is all nice and shiny, and we'll do the same thing to the cap. You can see the difference between the two. Of course, I'll mask off all the hardware first, but we'll go through the same process. And there's the cap all polished up. Put it together with the barrel, and it looks lovely. And that imprint is still there. So now we just have to wait for the shellac to dry, and we can put this pen back together again and fill it up. Now it's the next day, and the shellac is completely dried. So I'm going to test fill this without putting it in the pen. I'm going to squeeze on this sack.
Alright, now mommy, daddy button.
And make sure that there are no ink leaks around that seam before I put that section back in the barrel. Because once it's in the barrel, I'm going to shellac it down. So let's get out some Watermans, and we're going to test fill this pen. I'm just going to weigh it first, 2.86, and then we're going to fill it up just by squeezing on the sack and letting it inflate. Just squeeze all the air out and let it completely inflate with ink, and we get 0.8 milliliters of ink, which is typical for a small size sack like this. Now this is an accident waiting to happen right here, because we squeeze this, we're going to get ink, and it's very, very sensitive. So I've still got some talc on there, so we're going to orientate the Esterbrook logo right there, and that'll leave the lever on the back. I know some people put the lever on the top. I'm going to put the logo right there. There we go. Get our writing sample paper out and try this again now that it's full of ink. Let's check the wetness. Very, very wet indeed. And now it's very smooth with just a hint of feedback, and those edges, when it was sharp before on all those edges, it's all very smooth. very wet. This is a very pleasant writer. And I think we're done with this resurrection. And it's filled properly and it's writing properly, so I'm just going to pull that section and shellac that section down so we don't have any issues with ink leaking in the future. I have to be very careful so I don't get any squirts of ink out. There we go. Did it squirt? No, it did not. Get my shellac pen out, hold the section very carefully, and just paint. I'm just going to paint a small band of shellac just around the bottom of the section there and over top of that seam between the sack and the section. And then we're going to line the sack up again. And I'm going to spread that shellac around, and I wipe off the excess shellac and let that dry. And I'll come back with my thoughts about this fountain pen resurrection. So what are my thoughts about this fountain pen resurrection? Well, I love these little Esterbrook's. They come in such beautiful celluloid colors. This one in kind of a reddish brown, looks like root beer to me. I love this color. I've resurrected a few of these, some beautiful in blue, like a galaxy blue, and sometimes they come in pretty rough shape with the clips broken off, and it's very, very difficult to repair those clips. And sometimes the cap bands are loose, where the end finial is scratched or pulled off. But this one was in really good shape. When I was in the antique store purchasing this pen, I didn't have a loupe with me, and my eyes are pretty dim, so I wasn't able to really look at that nib other than the fact that it didn't look too badly damaged. When I got it home, I was pleasantly surprised under my loupe to see that it was actually a Cursive Italic, and it's writing like a champ. So I'm really, really happy with this resurrection. These pens aren't that expensive, mostly because a lot of them didn't survive in really good shape. This one's in really good shape. So I've polished it up so it looks almost brand new. It's got a new sack in it. I've shellacked that section down, and there's going to be a little bit of haze as that shellac dries because I wiped off the excess. So I'm going to polish that section back up again once it's completely dry and give it another overall polish. See, the cap makes marks on the surface. This is after polishing. The cap makes those marks. So I'm going to polish it again, but this pen is going to be an everyday writer for someone, and I'm very, very pleased with how it's come back to life. So I'm going to sell this pen for $90 US plus shipping, and if you're interested in purchasing this pen, please contact me at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and your address, and I'll get you a shipping quote. Shipping to contiguous North America is roughly about $10 these days US. Those of you members of Inkquiring Minds will see this resurrection first before it goes live on Sunday. So you'll get first dibs on purchasing this beautiful fountain pen. And if you're interested in upcoming resurrections, I've just purchased this Parker Vacuumatic pen and pencil set in a unique celluloid called Shadow Wave. Instead of being horizontal stripes of stacked celluloid, it is vertical stripes. And they are more rare than the regular ones. That should be coming into my hands in the next week or so. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos like this one the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you. Watching, and that's all she wrote.
I made this.